What's going on, ladies, gentlemen, listeners of the Didn't Ask Podcast? Welcome back to another episode of the If I Hear Podcast, the Didn't Ask Podcast. Welcome back to episode 78. How's everybody doing? I hope you had a good weekend. I certainly did. This weekend was jam-packed with sports entertainment. I'm just gonna call everything sports entertainment, even though we had wrestling, we had WWE wrestling, then we had UFC, and then we had the Dutch Grand Prix. All of them were in this weekend. All of them were in Europe, which meant that I had to pick and choose. So luckily, WWE decided to go fairly early on in the day, so they started at 7, I believe, and then they finished at 10:30 our time. And then I immediately switched over to UFC, which was going on for like an hour and a half at that point, I think. Or an hour maybe. And then I watched that, because that was some fantastic fights on that card. And then finishing that off at, I think it was like 12:30 at night. So I slept at 1, something like that. It was a very long day. But luckily, I didn't need to sleep that much, because I was hyped. I was hyped up for the Dutch Grand Prix. Of course, we saw during the qualifications on Saturday that Max Verstappen was, of course, the fastest. And he was faster. Like, he is the fastest man on that track. But it was just slightly. I think the end time was like 21 thousandths or something like that of a second. Like, it was absolutely such a small difference. And you can see that because of the track, right? So normally we have tracks that are pretty long. So you would have the same amount of tracks limit. Like, the length of the track would be about the same during a race. But when it comes to qualification, it's of course only looking at one lap. And if the one lap is very short, that means that everybody is going to be very close together, because you're not losing that much time in your corners and in your straights, because it's just not that much space for you to be there. So again, we saw Max Verstappen take first place, or pole position I should say, during the qualification, which meant that he would start the race in first place. No crazy things going on, luckily, with his engine and stuff like that, even though his engine of course broke down during the first qualification, which we hate to fucking see. But luckily, he made it to the qualification, started on pole position, which meant that is where the real test starts, right? There were so many things that could go wrong, and so many things did go wrong. We had, of course, Yuki Tsunoda, who got like a message from his team that the wheels weren't properly fitted, so he put his car on the side. Then the team was like, hey, everything is fine. Then he had to come in, get some new tires just to be sure that everything was correct. But he already took off his belt buckle, which then the team had to put back on. And then that was a whole rigmarole down there. So it took very long. Then he went back in the race. Then he mentioned that something broke, so he still had to put his car on the side. And then we had, of course, Valtteri Bottas, whose car just broke down as well, which meant that we got a safety car because his car was in a very unfortunate position. So they had to take that off the course. And then the fun starts, Like, we're going to see what people are going to do. I think we had at that point like 12 rounds left or 13 rounds left. So then the question is, okay, are we going softs? Are we going mediums? What are we going to do? We saw that most of the people on track went to softs, because why the fuck would you not do that? You only got 12 or 13 laps to go. And then we saw Hamilton and Perez go to mediums, and that was stupid. That was a very dumb idea. Like, luckily for Perez, it didn't really matter that much, because Sainz got a time penalty for an unsafe release, and therefore he had to be pushed back 5 seconds, or like his time got pushed back 5 seconds, which then meant, thanks to the safety car, that was gonna hurt. So I think he went from like 5th to 9th or 8th or something like that. Like, that fucking hurt. But luckily that meant for Perez that he got to move forward up a spot, so he got 5th place. And then we had Lewis Hamilton on 4th place. We had Leclerc in 3rd, Russell at 2nd, and of course Max Verstappen winning his home Grand Prix for the 2nd time in a row. which is, of course, that is fantastic. You always wish for Max to win that Grand Prix, especially, but man, doing it for the second time in a row, and of course with the helmet that had the design of his dad's old helmet, it's so fucking cool, man. That's such a fucking cool thing to say for him to his kids, if he ever gets some when he gets older. Like, that is such a fun fucking story to tell. And people always say like, oh yeah, Max is like he's very lucky and yada yada yada. It's like, from the race yesterday, there was no luck there. It was all pure skill, all pure communication. This week, you could clearly see the difference between good communication and bad communication, where Red Bull, and specifically Max Verstappen, of course, talks to his engineers, Gianpiero Lambiase. Like, they communicate so well with each other. The whole team knows, okay, this is what Max wants to do. This is what the team is saying. Like, okay, how many fucking time is it between me and the second person? How many time? What? Like, they communicate so well and everything goes swimmingly. Like, they had the fastest pit stop now. They had a pit stop of 2 seconds, which you are not even allowed to go below 2 seconds. So that was fucking fantastic. And that was, of course, the tire change for Perez. But yeah, we saw that Red Bull has super communication. They everything is planned out, everything goes according to plan, and then we have Ferrari, who just keeps fucking things up. Like, it's just not funny anymore. Ferrari is a team that was one of the best car manufacturers in Formula One, right? Like, they are Ferrari, they have a legacy, they have the biggest icon, like, in sports, and basically with the fucking horse, you know, the yellow emblem and the horse. But somehow, when the pressure started building for them, with Leclerc being in first place for a part of the championship this year, they just drowned. And they are continuing to drown, with Sainz being really the one that's getting fucked over constantly, because they, of course, are focusing on Leclerc. Now, less so than they were back then, because Leclerc, of course, was first in championship, and now he's definitely not anymore. I think he's back down to second, I believe, after going third for the last couple of weeks because of Perez. But yeah, like, this racing world is sink or swim, and they are clearly sinking right now, which is really, really sad for them. And they need to change some things, man. They have to change personnel, they have to change strategies, they have to change maybe even the head of the fucking team. Like, maybe they need to fucking kick him out and start over and just make sure that everything is going according to plan. But hey, this is not a podcast where I talk to you about Formula 1, UFC, or WWE. This is the podcast where I dive into the world of Reddit to see what the people asked Reddit and didn't ask me. So let's jump into the first question coming from the Ask Reddit subreddit for today, asked by user feisty_effect_7487, and they ask, what is a popular food you think sucks? Easy answer, sushi. Sushi is such a popular dish now in the Netherlands that we have basically every bigger, not big, but like bigger supermarket has a sushi bar. It's fucking outrageous if you ask me. Like, why does a normal supermarket need a sushi bar that sells like premium made sushi? Like, what the fuck, bro? Like, I personally hate fish to begin with, so I would never try that. But like, I am also not the biggest fan of like cold foods. And of course, there is like a difference between like cold yogurt and like cold food, where it's just like, hey, I like rice, but I don't necessarily want to have cold rice. You know what I'm saying? So I think that, to me, it is really sushi that is such a popular dish, and that every supermarket now sells sushi, like the made sushi, and some even have the, again, premium made, where you're standing next to it in the store. There's like a sushi chef going on, fucking chopping salmon and fucking everything. I think it's disgusting. I'm not even saying this like, oh, you've never tried it and you think it's disgusting. It's like, no. I actually have tried it. I've tried sushi with like avocado and maybe cucumber and stuff like that. But no, I don't like it. Again, I like my foods heated. I don't like cold foods. And then it's just like, ugh, the fishy, there is like a fishy smell as well. Like, ugh, no thank you. I rather eat something else. But thank you for your question, feisty_effect_7487. Moving on to the second question of the day, coming from user importance-of-time. And they ask, what is theoretically possible, but practically impossible? Saw this question, and I immediately started thinking about such a stupid thing, and that is facing through a wall or slash door. And I now while I'm thinking about it, I think of even more things. So let me explain the first one first. So facing through a wall or door or matter altogether is theoretically possible because, as far as I understand it, our bodies are made up out of atoms and stuff like that, which are constantly moving, and they don't really know a set form. So they constantly are moving in a set form, but like they themselves don't have a set form, which means that there is always a small bit of air between all these molecules and atoms. And the same thing goes for walls and doors and whatever other material. So in theory, you would be able to, when you walk into a wall, there is a minuscule chance. Like it's basically impossible, but theoretically speaking, it is possible. There is a possibility that when you hit the wall, that all those molecules that are basically free flowing would find the perfect way to basically flow through each other, and therefore you're basically facing through a wall. And that is such a funny and fascinating thing to me, that it is theoretically possible to run into a wall and basically go straight through it without the wall or yourself being damaged in what way whatsoever. And again, this is like a thing that is, again, real theoretical, and it has based on, again, atoms and stuff like that, that again, they're free flowing, and therefore they have the ability to basically phase through each other. While again, theoretically possible, it is basically impossible because the chances of it happening are like 1 to 100,000 billion, basically. It's absolutely insane. It's 1 to Google, I guess you can say that. Another thing that I was thinking about was the cooking the chicken by slapping it. And this is also very funny because it has to do with a slap that releases power and it releases Newton. And to cook a chicken, you need X amount of Newton. And then if you, of course, divide it by the power of a slap, which of course also has a set amount of Newton, that would mean that if you slap a chicken like 6,000 times, that you would cook the chicken to perfection, which is such a funny thing. And again, it's theoretically possible because you're basically using the same amount of force to do so, but it is practically impossible because you're, of course, not doing it in one go, so there is not enough friction to do stuff like that. And you know, it is a fucking weird thing that people have tried to do, but never really worked out for them. So going back to the question asked by a user, importance-of-time. What is theoretically possible but practically impossible? Theoretically, it is possible to phase through a wall without damaging you or the wall by the molecules basically phasing through each other. That is theoretically possible but practically impossible because the chances of it happening are so small because everything needs to line up perfectly. And then the other one is cooking a chicken by just slapping it. While again, theoretically being possible, it is also impossible because there is no way you would have enough force and friction at the same time to cook the chicken to perfection. But theoretically speaking, it would be possible to cook a chicken by slapping it. Thank you for your question, importance of time. Moving on to the third question of today, coming from Madison Iano. And they ask, you get $1,000 per person you annoy. What is the fastest way you can become a billionaire? I think the fastest thing to become a billionaire would be spam emails. You would go to the dark web, you buy some of those fucking emails, and then you just send one spam email to all the fucking people on the list, and you just go and you just say, this is a rickroll, and then you rickroll them and they get annoyed. Because it is also, the question is how to annoy somebody. Like, it's not, I don't have to like encumber, I just have to slightly annoy them. Like they just have to encumber them just the slightest to make them annoyed by me. So I think that spam emailing people would be a very smart and easy thing to do because you can do a lot of them very quickly, and that would be a very interesting thing to do. Another thing that you could do, and I don't know necessarily, and I don't condone this, don't do this, is to basically have people in rush hour that travel by train be very encumbered by having something on the train tracks or something like that. Just putting something down on the train tracks so that the trains stop and everybody has to fucking take different types of transport and whatever. And especially during rush hour at night. Like rush hour in the morning would be annoying, and I get that. But rush hour at night is going to annoy people even more because that's the time when people need to go home. They want to go home. They've worked for fucking 8 to 9 hours today. They are done with the day. They don't want to deal with anything anymore. And then there is something on the train tracks, and therefore their journey has been delayed and or just completely done. So I think that that is a really good option here. So going back to the question asked by user Mediciniano, you get $1,000 per person you annoy. What is the fastest way to become a billionaire? To me, I think that the fastest way would be to send out a spam email to hundreds of thousands of people. That's the easiest way to do so because it basically is zero investment and there is also basically zero effort to do so. So I think that that is a very good option. Another one would be to encumber the train during the evening rush hour by putting something on the train tracks and then having them delay the train, because that would annoy so many fucking people in one go, especially when you're doing it during rush hour at night. So that would be my question to you, Madison. Thank you for your question. Moving on to the fourth question of today, coming from user me_rebirth, and they ask, the cancellation of which show are you still frustrated about? To me, I am still very much frustrated by the cancellation of Glow. Glow was such a fun and interesting show, and it brought so many people to wrestling, especially women, that saw Glow on Netflix and were just like, hey, this is a interesting take on the show. Like it was, reeling it back, Glow itself as a show was such a fantastic show to begin with. So to me, it was such a fun concept that it was about professional wrestling. And what made it even more fun was that there are so many actual professional wrestlers in that show that either were just acting in the show, but also that some of them were actually helping the women by training them, by doing drills with them, by going through certain moves with them to make everything look real and to make everything look the way it should. So to me, that was such a highlight for me. And Glow is, for me especially, a cumulation of so many things that I love, where it's like, hey, it's a comedy and it's like a women drama type thing. And then there is wrestling. And then there is so many things that are going on and so many great actors in there. We had Alison Brie, we had Mark Maron, Betty Gilpin, which this was basically her breakthrough role somehow. Like, there were so many fun people on that show. Jackie Tone. Like, so many fun people on that show that made the show for what it was. And I felt like they were going into such a good direction. And especially now, looking at the landscape of entertainment now, wrestling is so fucking popular. It's incredible how popular wrestling is right now. So it's fucking stupid that they're not doing it. Like, we have Impact Wrestling, we have Ring of Honor, we have All Elite Wrestling, we have WWE. We have so many fucking wrestling companies right now. We have World of Women. Like, there are so many wrestling companies going on that it is fucking mind-boggling to me that Netflix hasn't just gone like, okay, we're going to do one final season, or hey, we're going to do a Netflix movie. It's going to be 2 hours. The budget is going to be X amount. Just finish the show. Just do something, finish it. Because I think that is very much a possibility in this case. Another show that I'm very upset about that it's got cancelled is Legends of Tomorrow. I think that Legends of Tomorrow was such a weird show when it got announced because it was basically like the misfit show where all the superheroes and some villains even from the other Arrowverse shows got together and got their own show, and it was such a weird thing. But I felt like they, especially after the first season, they found their footing and they knew exactly what they were doing. So with that, they made a fun concept out of the show. I feel like from the first episode as well, like they had a fun concept to the show where they were protecting people in history, famous people in history, by protecting them, making sure that certain timeline would run the way it should. And then it became crazier and crazier and crazier, where eventually we had fucking Cisco singing the Tong song in fucking Russia or whatever the fuck. Like, it was fucking crazy, bro. But it was such a fun time. And again, the show was a misfit show, but then eventually turned out to be one of the best Arrowverse shows that CW produced. And I mean that with all my heart, like that, all honesty, like that is what I feel about that show. So yeah, going back to the question asked by user me_rebirth, the cancellation of which TV show are you still frustrated about? For one, Glow. I feel like Glow was on such a good trajectory and they should have at least gotten a final season to be like, hey, this is the final season. You have done it. This is going to be it. Thank you for the fun times that you're given. And especially now, I get that Netflix is in a weird situation where they basically only want to produce new content and get more subscribers, but then they don't retain subscribers because they're canceling shows constantly. And it's such a weird downward spiral to me that they're in right now. So yeah, I would have loved to see Glow back. I would still love to see Glow back, especially in this landscape where wrestling is one of the most popular things going right now. We have so many different wrestling companies. We have so many indie companies that are coming up doing shows all over the globe. Like, it is fantastic to be a wrestling fan. Another show that I really am frustrated about how it got cancelled was Legends of Tomorrow. Of course, that had mostly to do with the selling of CW, which has led to so many cancellations of shows that I really liked. Of course, they canceled Dynasty because of it, and then they canceled Legends of Tomorrow. They canceled The Flash eventually now. It's like there are so many shows that got canceled because of the CW selling that it is not fun. But yeah, Legends of Tomorrow was such a special show and was such a fun show every fucking week that I'm very sad that it got canceled. Thank you for your question, Rebirth. And now, moving on to the final question coming from the Ask Reddit subreddit for today. Coming from user Gildenstern87. And he asks, what is your favorite variation of the saying, what the fuck? I was a big fan of GTA RP for a very long time. Like a very, very, very long time, where I was watching that shit every day, basically, for hours upon end. And one of the guys there, Moses Khan, his character's name, he would always go, what the bloody shit? And that was such a fun thing to me to say. And he did it like with the Indian accent. And oh man, I fucking creased up every fucking time he said that. And then eventually I started saying it as well. And then it was really bad, where I would just go like, what the bloody shit? What the bloody shit is going on, huh? What the bloody shit? And then he would say that every fucking time. And it was such a fun time. So, Gildenstern87, what's your favorite variation of the saying, what the fuck? And I would say, what the bloody shit is definitely my favorite. Thank you for that, Moses Khan. And now, moving on to the final question for today, coming from the Am I the Asshole subreddit, posted by a user slow-pianist-4431. And they ask, am I the asshole for bringing my sister-in-law's wallet to the restaurant when she conveniently always forgets it? My 28 female sister-in-law, Amy, 26 female, always comes to visit from out of town. She stays with us instead of a hotel and always wants to go to expensive restaurants. She always conveniently forgets her wallet or domes up with some excuses as to why she can't pay for her share. She has implied that since I make much more money than her, I should be the one that's paying. No, not my husband should pay, but me specifically. I do make a fair amount of money, but not so much that I can treat someone every time they come into town. Nonetheless, in the past, I have just paid the bill and asked her to pay me back. She never has. She has made a reservation at an extremely expensive restaurant last night, and before we left, I made it clear that I wouldn't be paying her bill. That this is where I might be the asshole, and I'll admit, I got this move straight from an episode of 2.5 Men. As we were leaving, her and my husband went to the car. I pretended I forgot something and went back inside. I found her wallet sitting right on top of her suitcase. I put it in my purse and we went to the restaurant. When we were done eating, I asked for separate bills. She said no, we need one bill because she forgot her wallet again. I reached in my purse and said, "This wallet?" She was extremely furious. She said that I should not have touched or grabbed her wallet. So am I the asshole for taking her wallet and bringing it to the restaurant? This was a really fun story to read, if you ask me. And I would say, no, you're definitely not the asshole in this situation. The whole situation is weird, I get it. But what your sister-in-law is doing is fucked up. Like, you're in a situation where it's like, hey, yeah, I can pay for the bill sometimes. But like, your sister-in-law is purposefully booking reservations at extremely expensive restaurants, like you're saying. That is just fucked up. So yeah, I would probably do the same thing to be just like, hey, no, we're not gonna do this shit anymore. You have your own money. You wanted to go to this expensive restaurant and I cannot fucking constantly pay for you, so you're gonna pay this shit for yourself. So I would definitely think you're not the fucking asshole in this situation. Now, I saw some comments and someone said, I'm gonna scroll down to that right now. Jissy_Lizzie, they said, not the asshole, but you totally should have flipped the switch, left your wallet at home, only brought your license so she had to cover the whole bill, then never taken her to a restaurant ever again. Honestly, while that sounds like a dick move, I think that would have been such a fun time where it's just like, hey, I forgot my wallet. I'm sorry. I thought I had it in my bag, but it's not there. I'm so sorry, man. And then, yeah, she should have just paid. But like, I feel like what you did was the most mature thing in the situation where, hey, while it does suck a little bit for the sister-in-law because she thought she got one over on you, this is a good way to just basically be like, hey, I'm never gonna pay for your shit ever again. And don't do this fucking bullshit ever again to me because I will fucking get you. You're gonna get caught. So yeah, going to the question asked by user slow-pianist-4431. Am I the asshole for bringing my sister-in-law's wallet to the restaurant when she conveniently always forgets it? And I would say, no, you're definitely not the asshole in this situation. Your sister-in-law is the asshole, certainly, when she conveniently forgets the wallet every time they go to an expensive restaurant that she happened to book. Which is a very interesting situation here, so definitely no. You are definitely not the asshole. Thank you for your question. And that is going to do it for me for this week, for this episode 78 of the Didn't Ask podcast. I hope you liked it, and if you do, please leave a rating on Apple Podcast or Spotify, because both places give you the ability to leave a review. You can find this podcast on basically all podcast platforms, but if you really want to know, you can go to anchor.fm/didn't-ask-pod. That link will be in the show description. Over here, you can find all the hyperlinks to all the podcast services of your choosing, like Podcast Addict, like Pocket Cast, like Apple Podcast, like Amazon Podcast, like Stitcher, you name it. It's there. If it's not there, let me know. You can do that by going to that anchor.fm website and pressing the message button on top of that screen. And then you have the ability to record a voice memo for me saying like, hey, this podcast isn't here. But you can also use that voice message button to ask me a personal question. If you don't want your voice to be heard on this Right Here podcast, I can totally understand that. Say that somewhere in your message, then I'll just read your question out myself so I can answer your question but still keep you anonymous. Well, that's going to do it for me for this week. I'll be back next week. And if you want to know what I'm doing in the meantime, you can go to trek.tv. That link will be in the show description as well. Over here, you can see all the TV shows and movies that I'm watching. sometimes while I'm watching them, so you can keep up with what I'm doing. Okay, that's gonna do it for now. I'll see you back next week. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.